capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is $2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I know.
Really hard.
And maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Red Theory. Tonight we're going to be continuing on with our series covering Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. We just finished up Chapter 4, which was kind of the pre-revolutionary time in the U.S., talking about Bacon's Rebellion and some other key points, and how it was, everything was coming to a head where it was pushing towards some sort of revolutionary change. And now we're going to find out which way that ended up breaking. Probably won't be surprised at this point, if you've been following in this series, to learn that it's not going to go the way of the working class getting much or any more power. That's not really at all what the Revolutionary War was about. It was mostly a reaction to certain elites in this country wanting to have more power than they were allowed under a monarchy. So we went from a more centralized monarchy to basically more or less decentralized aristocracy after the fact. But it's important to go through exactly how that happened, and that's why we're reading this book, because there's still a lot of relevancy to today, the way that the current power structures are still in place to forever favor the class of people that owns stuff, rather than the class of people that does the work for those owners. So I think we'll start right into it. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm trying to build back up my viewership on Twitch, so if you're finding this somewhere else, finding this stream somewhere other than Twitch, it would be great if you could have it over there. Sorry for the noise in the background. It is 100 degrees in Minnesota, so I have to have the air conditioner on, and I have a little windscreen in front of the microphone. I'm doing my best to stop the worst of the noise, but I've already been able to hear that it's not great. So I do apologize for that. Anyway, there's the link for Twitch. It just becomes too much background noise for you. You can always come back to the chapter and listen to it on your own time. So there's the YouTube link for the current chapter. There you have it. Alright, well, let's dig into this chapter. It is called A Kind of Revolution.
This recording is a product of Audio Anarchy, A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. Chapter 5, A Kind of Revolution. The American victory over the British Army was made possible by the existence of an already armed people. Just about every white male had a gun and could shoot. The revolutionary leadership distrusted the mobs of poor, but they knew the revolution had no appeal to slaves and Indians. They would have to woo the armed white population. This was not easy. Yes, mechanics and sailors, some others were incensed against the British, but general enthusiasm for the war was not strong. While much of the white male population went into military service at one time or another during the war, only a small fraction stayed. Jon T, in his study of the Revolutionary Army, a people numerous and armed, says they, quote, grew weary of being bullied by local committees of safety, by corrupt deputy assistant commissaries of supply, and by bands of ragged strangers with guns in their hands calling themselves soldiers of the revolution, unquote. Ch estimates that perhaps a fifth of the population was actively treasonous. John Adams had estimated a third opposed, a third in support, a third neutral. Alexander Hamilton, an aide of George Washington and an up-and-coming member.
So, I mean, we're already kind of seeing how there can be more than two sides to a given conflict. Sure, it was probably not great for the I mean, it definitely was. We've been seeing how terrible it was for the working class when the monarchy was in place, when the colonies were ruled over by King George. But to say that then the other side has to be, fighting for the owning class that wanted more freedom, well, I mean, it's kind of analogous to what we have today. We have basically a two-party system, and that is how it is treated, as though there is no other possibility. You either have to be for, a march towards fascism, which is not all that different from a monarchy. You have a group of people that have absolute power. Basically, the only difference is there's still private property, but it's pretty private enterprise and government are pretty well intermeshed, and it's all for the service of the rulers. So not a big difference between fascism and monarchism. So that's a pretty clear analogy to today. We have, like I said, one party that is for basically having a ruler. They were the Caitlin Bennetts of the world, tweeting out things like "Rise, Emperor Trump" when the January 6th insurrection happened, and a lot of other conservatives who seemed like they would be just fine living under some sort of more authoritarian rule as long as they ended up on top. Kind of funny that I was talking about how America is built on freedom, and, liberty, and everyone having the right to do what they please and go where they want and all this stuff, but when it comes down to it, they're pretty willing to just throw that all aside, as long as it means that they don't lose power. So there's that. And then the other party, or the other choice of the day during the Revolutionary War would have been for the business class, the owners, who were pushing for revolution the hardest, trying to rally the poor to their cause. It's much like the Democratic Party today, who definitely don't want to do away with capitalism. Are really happy to keep on benefiting from it, but continually position themselves as the only alternative, and a more kinder, gentler alternative to the Republicans, which may be true. The thing is, in both of these cases, there are other options entirely. That I'm not even sure if he really discusses that. I don't know if there was a significant, I guess it would be proto-socialist movement. I don't know exactly when socialism became a commonly used term, but it could have been a thing at the time. That would actually be interesting to go back into that history a little bit more. But yeah, just like today, there's a hidden third option. Or there's plenty of other options beyond that. You can definitely take the libertarian route, which is just confused and basically indecipherable jumbled mess of contradictory ideas. So, many more options than three, but there's definitely some good ones along the lines of socialism that could be employed today and could have been employed back then as well. Instead of just leaving it at, here's the new master, pretty much the same as the old master. And it could have kept going. As the USSR did, for better or worse. That is how things went down when there was the original February Revolution that overthrew the monarchy there. And then within a year's time, there was the October Revolution, which ushered in socialism, more or less. So, yeah, maybe that would have been too fast at the time as well, because it does kind of seem like the USSR went a little bit too fast. Not enough people were on board, and too many people took advantage for it to be a more permanent arrangement of power. Hard to say, because there's so many external forces and internal forces in both cases that would be push the wheel of power backwards in either case. So there's never a clean break in history. It's always very messy. There's always very many moving pieces. So it's hard to say how things could have gone in any situation if one piece or another had fallen differently. Right, back to the text.
Of the new elite wrote from his headquarters, quote, "Our countrymen have all the folly of the ass and all the passiveness of the sheep. They are determined not to be free. If we are saved, France and Spain must save us." Unquote. Slavery got in the way in the South. South Carolina, insecure since the slave uprising in Stono in 1739, could hardly fight against the British. Her militia had to be used to keep slaves under control. The men who first joined the colonial militia were generally, quote, hallmarks of respectability or at least of full citizenship, unquote, in their communities, Ch says. Excluded from the militia were friendly Indians, free Negroes, white servants, and free white men who had no stable home. But desperation led to the recruiting of the less respectable whites. Massachusetts and Virginia provided for drafting strollers, vagrants, into the militia. In fact, the military became a place of promise for the poor, who might rise in rank, acquire some money, change their social status. Here was the traditional device by which those in charge of any social order mobilize and discipline a recalcitrant population, offering the adventure and rewards of military service to get poor people to fight for a cause they may not see clearly as their own. A wounded American lieutenant at Bunker Hill.
Isn't that kind of familiar too? Today there's an entire propaganda machine built up around pushing whatever current conflict we are in around the world, or backing in one way or another, indirectly, towards indoctrinating people into believing that by joining the army or the military, I should say, all branches of the military, you are somehow protecting freedom and it's the entire freedom isn't free sort of way of looking at things that's silly, to say the least. But yeah, the propaganda continues on today to more or less trick people into a military that is fighting wars that don't really concern most average people, that are basically just for the benefit of the owning class. Still the owning class, as it was back then. They advance economic rationales for why we get into wars. So, interesting. Let's move on.
Interviewed by Peter Oliver, a Tory, who admittedly might have been looking for such a response, told how he joined the rebel forces, quote, "I was a shoemaker, and got my living by my labour. When this rebellion came on, I saw some of my neighbours got into commission. They were no better than myself. I was very ambitious and did not like to see those men above me. I was asked to enlist as a private soldier. I offered to enlist upon having a lieutenant's commission, which was granted. I imagined myself now in a way of promotion. If I was killed in battle, there would be an end to me, but if my captain was killed, I should rise in rank, and should still have a chance to rise higher. These, sir, were the only motives of my entering into the service. For as to the dispute between Great Britain and the colonies, I know nothing of it. Jon...
So again, that is the same sort of tactics they use to get people that are in bad economic situations to enlist into the military so that they can fight conflicts and wars that they really don't, that the average person doesn't understand, doesn't have any stake in, does not rise or fall based on the outcome of. And but they layer on top of that the patriotic indoctrination that it's also doing the duty of your country. So they have put the military up on this pedestal that it can basically not be criticized, or at least the people that join the military cannot be criticized. But really, when it comes down to it, most people join because it gives them economic opportunity they otherwise might not have. It helps them get out of their small towns. They recruit specifically into impoverished places for that reason, because they want people that don't have a lot of better options. So here we are at the start of the country, basically. Nothing's really different in that sense.
Ch investigated the subsequent experience of that Bunker Hill lieutenant. He was William Scott of Peterborough, New Hampshire, and after a year as prisoner of the British, he escaped, made his way back to the American Army, fought battles in New York, was captured again by the British, and escaped again by swimming the Hudson River one night with his sword tied around his neck and his watch pinned to his hat. He returned to New Hampshire, recruited a company of his own, including his 2 eldest sons, and fought in various battles until his health gave way. He watched his eldest son die of camp fever after 6 years of service. He had sold his farm in Peterborough for a note that, with inflation, became worthless. After the war, he came to public attention when he rescued 8 people from drowning after their boat turned over in the New York harbor. He then got a job surveying western lands with the Army, but caught a fever and died in 1796. Scott was one of many revolutionary fighters, usually of lower military ranks from poor and obscure backgrounds. Ch's study of the Peterborough contingent shows that the prominent and substantial citizens of the town had served only briefly in the war. Other American towns show the same pattern. As Ch puts it, quote, "Revolutionary America may have been a middle-class society, happier and more prosperous than any other in its time, but it contained a large and growing number of fairly poor people, and many of them did much of the actual fighting and suffering between 1775 and 1783. A very old story." Unquote. The military conflict itself, by dominating everything in its time, diminished other issues, made people choose sides in the one contest that was publicly important, forced people onto the side of the revolution whose interest in independence was not at all obvious. Ruling elites seemed to have learned through the generations, consciously or not, that war makes them more secure against internal trouble. The force of military preparation had a way of pushing neutral people into line. In Connecticut, for instance, a law was passed requiring military service of all males between 16 and 60, omitting certain government officials, ministers, Yale students and faculty, Negroes, Indians, and mulattoes. Someone called to duty could provide...
That's strange. I guess some of them are to protect the people from from conscription. That would be the minorities that they just listed. And then other groups, it would be, I'm sorry, we had that backwards. So that would be the Yale students, and Yale in particular, interesting. But that would be the upper class people that were in college, so that would be to protect them from having to actually risk their neck for the things that are being fought in their name, or the wars that are being fought in their name. And then I would guess that the other ones, the racial minorities that they listed, would be to, I would assume, keep the racial purity of the armed forces intact. Interesting the way that they came down on all that.
Provide a substitute or get out of it by paying £5. When 18 men failed to show up for military duty, they were jailed and, in order to be released, had to pledge to fight in the war. Ch says, quote, "The mechanism of their political conversion was the militia," unquote. What looks like the democratization of the military forces in modern times shows up as something different. A way of forcing large numbers of reluctant people to associate themselves with the national cause, and by the end of the process, believe in it. Here in the War for Liberty was conscription, as usual, cognizant of wealth. With the impressment riots against the British still remembered, impressment of seamen by the American Navy was taking place by 1779. A Pennsylvania official said, quote, "We cannot help observing how similar this conduct is to that of the British officers during our subjection to Great Britain, and are persuaded it will have the same unhappy effects vis-a-vis an estrangement of the affections of the people from authority, which, by an easy progression, will proceed to open opposition and bloodshed." Unquote. Watching the new, tight discipline of Washington's army, a chaplain in Concord, Massachusetts wrote, quote, "New laws, the strictest government is taking place, and great distinction is made between officers and men. Everyone is made to know his place and keep it, or be immediately tied up and receive not 1, but 30 or 40 lashes."
Interesting. I wonder why that would be, that everyone needs to know their place and not ever question the hierarchy of things, especially in the Revolutionary War. I mean, my guess would be that it would be because they don't want them getting any ideas once the current revolution has been completed, that they might just keep going and keep tearing down people in high places. They have to know exactly when to stop and be afraid to go any further.
Unquote. The Americans lost the first battles of the war. Bunker Hill, Brooklyn Heights, Harlem Heights, the Deep South. They won small battles at Trenton and Princeton, and then, in a turning point, a big battle at Saratoga, New York in 1777. Washington's frozen army hung on at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, while Benjamin Franklin negotiated an alliance with the French monarchy, which was anxious for revenge on England. The war turned to the south, where the British won victory after victory until the Americans, aided by a large French army with the French Navy blocking off the British from supplies and reinforcements, won the final victory of the war at Yorktown, Virginia.
Interesting how that's not how it is presented in elementary history books. I would assume across the nation. And that's certainly not the way that I learned it. The way that I learned it was that this Washington, after being holed up at Valley Forge, crossing the Delaware, was the turning point of the war. But it sounds like they've lost time and time and time again after that point. Kind of interesting that that's not really spoken of all that much. And I also remember being taught that the French helped a little bit, but not that they were in any way a decisive force in the final victory. So, isn't that fun? So yeah, and so you have, and really the French were only in it, as he said, to spit in the eye of the English who they were mad at. So it's just two monarchical empires fighting a proxy war on American soil. In many ways. A lot of parallels to today. Not very hard to look at that one and see the parallels. All right, moving on.
in 1781. Through all this, the suppressed conflicts between rich and poor among the Americans kept reappearing. In the midst of the war in Philadelphia, which Eric Foner describes as, quote, a time of immense profits for some colonists and terrible hardships for others, the inflation, prices rose in 1 month that year by 45%, led to agitation and calls for action. One Philadelphia newspaper carried a reminder that in Europe, quote, the people have always done themselves justice when the scarcity of bread has arisen from the avarice of forestallers. They have broken open magazines, appropriated stores to their own use without paying for them, and in some instances have hung up the culprits who created their distress. In May of 1779,
Interesting. Interesting that they're the culprits of their distress. I wonder if they're talking about the store owners themselves who are just profiteering from wartime scarcity, or the political leaders that were continuing the Revolutionary War.
and the first company of Philadelphia artillery petitioned the assembly against the troubles of, quote, the middling and poor, unquote, and threatened violence against, quote, those who are avariciously intent upon amassing wealth by the destruction of the more virtuous part of the community, unquote. That same month, there was a mass meeting, an extra-legal gathering which called for price reductions and initiated an investigation of Robert Morris, a rich Philadelphian who was accused of holding food from the market. In October came the Fort Wilson riot, in which a militia group marched into the city and to the house of James Wilson, a wealthy lawyer and revolutionary official who had opposed price controls in the Democratic Constitution adopted in Pennsylvania in 1776.
Well, now, why would a prominent businessman ever be against democracy? That's a bit puzzling, isn't it? Isn't that what the war was being fought for? Was a new democracy instead of rule by the authoritarian regime of the English monarchy? Kind of interesting that he was then against a democratic structure of power.
The military were driven away by a silk-stocking brigade of well-off Philadelphia citizens. It seemed that the majority of white colonists who had a bit...
I wish he went in a little bit more, to a little more detail on that. Driven off by the city's well-to-do? The militia was driven off by the city's well-to-do? How did they manage that? I'd really like to know those details.
bit of land or no property at all were still better off than slaves or indentured servants or Indians, and could be wooed into the coalition of the Revolution. But when the sacrifices of war became more bitter, the privileges and safety of the rich became harder to accept. About 10% of the white population, an estimate of Jackson, Maine in the social structure of revolutionary America, large landholders and merchants, held 1,000 pounds or more in personal property and 1,000 pounds in land at the least. And these men owned nearly half the wealth of the country and held as slaves 1/7 of the country's people. The Continental Congress, which governed the colonies through the war, was dominated by rich men, linked together in factions and compacts by business and family connections. These links connected North and South, East and West. For instance, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia was connected with the Adamses of Massachusetts and the Shippens of Pennsylvania. Delegates from middle and southern colonies were connected with Robert Morris of Pennsylvania through commerce and land speculation. Morris was superintendent of finance, and his assistant was Governor Morris. Morris's plan was to give more assurance to those who had loaned money to the Continental Congress, and gain the support of officers by voting half pay for life those who stuck to the end. This ignored the common soldier, who was not getting paid, who was suffering in the cold, dying of sickness, watching the civilian profiteers get rich. On New Year's Day, 1781, the Pennsylvania troops near Morristown, New Jersey, perhaps emboldened by rum, dispersed their officers, killed one captain, wounded others, and were marching, fully armed with cannon, toward the Continental Congress at Philadelphia. George Washington handled it cautiously. Informed of these developments by General Anthony Wayne, he told Wayne not to use force. He was worried that the rebellion might spread to his own troops. He suggested Wayne get a list of the soldiers' grievances, and said Congress should not flee Philadelphia because then the way would be open for the soldiers to be joined by Philadelphia citizens. He sent Knox rushing to New England on his horse to get 3 months' pay for the soldiers, while he prepared 1,000 men to march on the mutineers as a last resort. A peace was negotiated in which 1/2 the men were discharged, the other half got furloughs. Shortly after this, a smaller mutiny took place in the New Jersey line, involving 200 men who defied their officers and started out for the state capital at Trenton. Now, Washington was ready. 600 men, who themselves had all been well fed and clothed, marched on the mutineers and surrounded and disarmed them. 3 ringleaders were put on trial immediately in the field. 1 was pardoned, and 2 were shot by firing squads made up of their friends, who wept as they pulled the triggers. It was...
There's that cruelty again. There's that unique European level of cruelty. Making you shoot your friends because you all are starving and trying to revolt just to keep living. You're not being paid. You're not, and you're just starving, and you're starving and freezing to death. And see how they play people against each other. There's always someone who has a little bit less. And you can just say, hey, it's like that meme of the old man. I think it might have supposed to have originally been Rupert Murdoch. Not quite sure. But he's sitting at a table and he's got a pile of cookies. And on his left and right are 2 very underfed people. And one of them has a cookie and the other has none. And so he turns to the one with a cookie and says, "Watch out, that fellow over there is eyeing up your cookie." And this is the game. This is the game that they play. They will do what they can to pit various desperate groups of people against each other and use as leverage that desperation. Because there's always someone a little bit worse off than you. This is why, that's kind of a wild aside, but it is connected. This is why not having a minimum wage at all does not work. It ends up being a race to the bottom because, as I said, there's always someone willing to do it for less, willing to do it for practically nothing, willing to do it just for room and board, whatever the job may be. So without even having a floor to how much someone is allowed to offer for a given job, you just end up pitting groups of poor against groups of even more poor. And this is also where things like xenophobia and racism come in handy as tools to further whip up division. And make it less about, class, because you don't want the people looking at or thinking about class, and you make it more about, whatever prejudices are already in the air due to ignorance and just lack of understanding between the various groups. And you just press on that, and you get the people to fight each other even more. And again, it's just a race to the bottom. That's what the scheme in place. So as long as we're going to allow owners who can just sit above everything and parcel out jobs as they see fit for whatever wage they can get away with, then there has to be very strict regulation. Otherwise, they will just keep on pitting people against each other until they're making their maximum profit. The only bottom at that point is basically replacement. You know, how little can you get away with and still have your workers coming back to work? Or you might not even need that if there's new immigrants coming in all the time, or influx of people from other parts of the country. Maybe you can just run them through the meat grinder and use them up and not even give them enough money to ever really make a meager living on.
Was an example, Washington said. 2 years later, there was another mutiny in the Pennsylvania line. The war was over and the army had disbanded, but 80 soldiers demanding their pay invaded the Continental Congress headquarters in Philadelphia and forced the members to flee across the river to Princeton, ignominiously turned out of doors. As one historian sorrowfully wrote, John Fiske, The Critical Period, quote, by a handful of drunken mutineers.
That's really terrible. So again, they're making it about, in a way, about class. But suggesting that because they, you know, are of low class, that of course they're drunks and have low morals and aren't deserving of any pay. But you know, it's never about their own class. It's never about them withholding what has been promised. This happens time and time again, where soldiers in the U.S. Army just won't get their pay, or the pay that they are due, or the benefits that they are due. They just keep getting screwed again and again after they are out of the Army, or once they are just deemed less useful than is worth bothering. I'm pretty sure that in later chapters it talks about the bonus army protests marched on Washington because they were promised bonuses and they were starving to death. And they were met with brutal repression from the U.S. government. So here we are again. The noble U.S. promising the people that actually did the fighting for them a lot of money that they never intended to follow through with in getting to them.
What soldiers in the Revolution could do only rarely, rebel against their authorities, civilians could do much more easily. Ronald Hoffman says, quote, the Revolution plunged the states of Delaware, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and to a much lesser degree, Virginia, into divisive civil conflicts that persisted during the entire period of struggle. The Southern lower classes resisted being mobilized for the Revolution. They saw themselves under the rule of a political elite, win or lose against the British. In Maryland, for instance, by the new Constitution of 1776, to run for governor, one had to own 5,000 pounds of property. To run for state senator, 1,000 pounds. Thus, 90% of the population were excluded from holding office. And so, as Hoffman says, small slaveholders, non-slaveholding planters, tenants, renters, and casual day laborers posed a serious problem of social control for the Whig elite. With black
So yeah, this country set up for, of, and by the people. You know, actual results may vary, and by the people, they really mean just a certain, very select group of people. It is just, I just keep getting astounded by how much propaganda gets shoved down our throats as we grow up. That talks about how we're fighting for freedom, we're fighting for democracy, fighting to have a land that was for everybody, and not just for the benefit of the few. When that was definitely not true. It wasn't even just for white people. It was for white landowning people. And white landowning men at that. From the beginning, this is what our country has been set up for. And it has only been over the course of coming up on 250 years. Yeah, with that being just 4 years now? Right. Yeah, 2026. 250 years. It's taken us that long to go from only white, landowning, Christian men being able to have any power in government to now most people, on paper being able to have power in government, although the idea that any poor person could actually run for any office is laughable without tons of outside support. It's just not a thing that is really possible. And it's certainly by design. We certainly could have it where all elections were publicly financed and only publicly financed. So you get an allotment, maybe you have some sort of a test, you maybe get such and such number of signatures for a particular office to be able to run for it, and then you would get campaign money, and everyone would get the same amount, but everyone would get that money, so that, it would at least give you the ability, if you were not as well off, to put out ads and stuff like that. That's not to say that you would still be able to devote the time to actually running a campaign, but at least you wouldn't be held back by lack of advertising dollars. So we could do things that way. We could make it even more democratic. Give even more people a chance to hold elected office. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. But really, it's been this long, and now when we can vote, now black people can vote. Now people can vote without a poll tax or a test. It's been a very long road, very gradually struggling to wrest away little bits of power from that original ruling class. But still, by and large, it's the same ruling class. The same sorts of people still hold the vast majority of the power in this country. You look at any measure of power, any corridor of power, I should say. Whether that's elected office, you look at the Senate, arguably the most powerful elected body in the country. You look at their presidency, who holds the power, by and large, in both those places. These rich, white, business-owning or land-owning men. Just as it was in the beginning. That's as far as we've made it in 250 years. We just now have a woman be vice president, and a woman of color like that, and a black president. And the Senate is way disproportionately white and male. You look at the CEOs of virtually any large company, and the boards as well. Again, almost wall-to-wall white men. So the country was set up on purpose to favor those people, and lo and behold, 250 years later, it's still really favoring those people. And yes, we have made strides. We don't have legal slavery unless you are a prisoner, especially a prisoner in Louisiana. They can literally coerce you into working for little to no money, even if you are, certain life sentence. So that's, I mean, even that, like, you can't even say, well, yes, we've just done away with slavery, so that's good, because we haven't completely done that. Not even in a legal sense. You can still legally enslave people. That was the loophole in the 13th Amendment. It says that unless they were duly convicted of certain crimes, they could not enslave them anymore. So, alright, let's move on.
Slaves, 25% of the population, and in some counties, 50%. Fear of slave revolts grew. George Washington had turned down the requests of blacks seeking freedom to fight in the Revolutionary Army. So when the British military commander in Virginia, Lord Dunmore, promised freedom to Virginia slaves who joined his forces, this created consternation. A report from one Maryland county worried about poor whites encouraging slave runaways. Quote, "The insolence of Negroes in this county is come to such a height that we are under a necessity of disarming them, which we effected on Saturday last. We took about 80 guns, some bayonets, swords, etc. The malicious and imprudent speeches of some among the lower classes of whites have induced them to believe that their freedom depended on the success of the king's troops. We therefore cannot be too vigilant nor too rigorous with those who promote and encourage this disposition in our slaves." Even more unsettling was white rioting in Maryland against leading families supporting the Revolution, who were suspected of hoarding needed commodities. The class hatred of some of these disloyal people was expressed by one man who said, quote, "It was better for the people to lay down their arms and pay the duties and taxes laid upon them by the king and parliament than to be brought into slavery and to be commanded and ordered about as they were." A wealthy Maryland landowner, Charles Carroll, took note of the surly mood all around him. Quote, "There is a mean, low, dirty envy which creeps through all the ranks and cannot suffer a man of superiority of fortune, of merit, or of understanding in fellow citizens. Either of these are sure to entail a general ill will and dislike upon the owners." Despite this, Maryland authorities retained control. They made concessions, taxing land and slaves more heavily, letting debtors pay in paper money. It was a sacrifice by the upper class to maintain power, and it worked.
Hey there, Code Dancer. So the current topic is we are going through the audiobook of A People's History of the United States. It's a history of the United States told from the people with the least power at any given time. So right now we are going through the Revolutionary War times, as told by the working class, basically. So that's what we're doing tonight.
In the lower South, however, in the Carolinas and Georgia, according to Hoffman, quote, "Vast regions were left without the slightest apparition of authority," unquote. The general mood was to take no part in a war that seemed to have nothing for them. Quote, "Authoritative personages on both sides demanded that common people..."
Oh, you can hear much better now, Natalie? Good. I switched the audio. I think it had reset to the default settings. So it was not coming, it was not being picked up by the microphone. I'm going to get even closer to the microphone too, because it sounds like that's helping a little bit. But it was just going to the default settings, so I think there was a lot of the noise from the air conditioner that was being picked up. Hopefully there's a little bit less now. I know I can still hear it in my headphones, so it's going to be some, which I do apologize for, but as I said earlier, it's 100 degrees outside here in Minnesota. That's good. I'm really glad to hear that, Natalie. But yeah, it's 100 degrees outside, so I usually don't mind suffering a little bit of heat in order to preserve the audio quality. But when it's that hot, I can't just melt into my chair and still hope to have something interesting to say about the current topic. So, but good to see you. Glad to have you. Yeah, let's continue on.
People supply material, reduce consumption, leave their families, or even risk their lives. Forced to make hard decisions, many flailed out in frustration or evaded and defied first one side, then the other. Washington's military commander in the Lower South, Nathaniel Greene, dealt with disloyalty by a policy.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, Code Dancer. You say, when people say history is written by the victors, they don't always realize that implies giving a voice to the antebellum South and to Nazis. So there's more to it than that, I would say. When we talk about the antebellum South, when we talk about the Nazis, we're still both talking about the ruling elite of their particular time and place. So that's not to say that we should give a voice to those people necessarily, but more so the people that are most affected by it and have the least control in the outcome one way or another. So that would be, it would be an interesting history to go into how the non-slaveholding Southerners felt about their time and place during, say, the Civil War, or how the average person in Nazi Germany felt about things. And remember, too, that the first victims of the Nazis were the socialists and the travelers, often pejoratively called the gypsies. That's not a term that is in favor anymore. But then also the 6 million Jews that died in that too. So if we were going to look for a different perspective, those would be the perspectives that I'd be a lot more interested in. I read a pretty good book, I would say, by, now his name just went right out of my head. Viktor Frankl. What's the name of that book? But he was a Holocaust survivor, and I found his point of view very interesting. Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist. What was his big book that he did? Let's look at his biography here. Anyways, he was an Austrian psychiatrist and psychotherapist who developed this psychological approach known as logotherapy, widely recognized as the third school of Viennese psychotherapy, after the first school of Sigmund Freud and the second school of Alfred Adler. He has some interesting ideas. I don't know that I totally agreed with all of the psychological stuff that he put into, and I can't remember the book. I will find it though. But it was definitely a really interesting book to hear the perspectives of him and other people that also went through the Holocaust that he biographied. So he was Jewish and was forced to close his practice after Nazi Germany annexed Austria. Let's see. Let's go down to his books. Man, having trouble finding it, but I will. Viktor Frankl book. Let's see what comes up with that. I'm sure it will come up. Man's Search for Meaning. That's the one. That was really good. And like I said, I don't know that I agreed with the entire book, but it was a really interesting perspective to gain. See if I can find a Goodreads or something to link in the chat there. Yeah, here's a Goodreads one. I like Goodreads a lot. Good way to keep track of what you read every year. So anyway, here's Man's Search for Meaning, a synopsis of it. There you have it. All right. So yeah, I missed a few comments there as I was searching for that. So Go Dancer says there was a Japanese movie called The Wind Also Rises. It celebrates and gives context to a hero of imperialist Japan. Now, I always find other perspectives interesting, even if I don't necessarily agree with them. I find empathy to be a really important and powerful tool. And the thing about empathy is it's often misused and used interchangeably with sympathy. So what empathy is not is just feeling bad for someone or feeling the same thing that they do. That's sympathy. Empathy is putting yourself into their shoes, trying to understand their perspective from their point of view. And you don't have to take on their perspective as your own after that. You don't have to feel what they feel. You don't even have to agree with the conclusions that they do or their point of view in any way. It's just trying to understand where they're coming from. And I think that even when we're talking about people that we very much disagree with, it is important to empathize, because you can at least understand where they're coming from. And if you don't understand where they're coming from in any way, then you're kind of just flailing in the dark when you're trying to change their mind or, provide a different alternative, or even talk to them as, person to person. This empathy at least gives you a roadmap to potential change. So Code Dancer says, will we ever have peace as long as the losing side has heroes? I don't think that's really the issue. What is really at issue is that poor people never choose the wars. Poor people never decide that this and such should be, or these people should be our enemy. And these people we should spend the wealth of the nation to go and smash or suppress or whatever. As long as rich people are allowed to, well, and more than just even rich people, as long as the owning class is allowed to take the rest of us into war, then we can never have peace. That is a literal impossibility. Hey, James, good to see you. So that is at the root of all war is rich men's ambitions, and specifically rich business owners' ambitions. Virtually all wars are fought over power and control over resources by the ruling elites, for lack of a better term, but by the people that pull the levers of power in business. And if there's not a separate private class of business owners, then it would be the monarchy pulling those same strings. So yeah. as long as we have capitalism, a legal means of exploiting poor people and less fortunate people by people that just happen to be in better positions as their spawn point in life, then we will never have peace, because it will always be it's like the Zap Brannigan quote from Futurama, where he's like, many of you will die. Oh wait, no, that's not even Zap Brannigan. I screwed it up. Lord Farquaad from Shrek. Many of you will die, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. That is all of right-wing ideology in a nutshell. As long as powerful people are allowed to sacrifice the lives of the people that they rule over, then it's always going to be the easiest choice to just send a bunch of people to their death for your own benefit, especially when you have built up some sort of idea that you deserve to be in the ruler's seat. You deserve all of the things that you have. Less easy to do under capitalism than it is under feudalism. We don't have the divine right of kings. We at least maintain the pretense that, no matter who you are, you can rise above your station. You can go from rags to riches. So, not quite as all-powerful are the ruling class under capitalism, but they still are able to send a whole lot of poor people to do their dirty work and win treasure for them in the long run without having to risk their own necks. So you say, it is my belief that Germany and Japan underwent a forced cultural change imposed by the Allies in the aftermath of the fighting. Well, that very well may be. This forced cultural change is underplayed in the history books. Yeah, that could be. Yeah. I don't know that all of Japanese culture at that time is worth preserving. And there was a lot of fascist sentiment during the World War II period in Japan, and a lot of patriarchal ideas that went along with it and were reinforced. So I think that's okay to consign all of that to the dustbin of history. But yeah, the U.S. was pretty heavy-handed with Japan after the war. That's hard to contend that. Hard to contend otherwise, I should say. So Natalie says, was he saved because he had used to the Nazis since he had a doctorate in psych? Yeah, it sounds like he was useful to the Nazis, and that's why Viktor Frankl, going back to Viktor Frankl, why he was spared. Here's a little Britannica biography of Viktor Frankl for you, if you're curious about him as a figure. So, Code Dancer says, Colin Powell once said, no diplomatic mission will ever be effective without the threat of military force. Well, that's just dumb. I'm sorry, but that's dumb. We can offer much more than a stick when we want to shape world relationships. There's plenty that the U.S. has to offer beyond threats. I mean, really. We can offer sharing of technology. We can offer trade. We can offer helping to industrialize countries that wish to do so. That would make change too. So that's stupid to say that. I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm just saying that Colin Powell quote was stupid. That we always have to back up every diplomatic interaction with the threat of force. That's ridiculous. And the flip side of that too is that there are some situations around the world that the U.S. just has no control over. We're seeing that right now play out in the Russia versus Ukraine war. We can only affect that indirectly. We can never truly threaten military force because Russia has nuclear weapons. We are at the point where any country that has nuclear weapons cannot be stopped by another country. And that includes the U.S. when we went into Iraq. That includes the U.S. when we went into and stayed for 2 decades in Afghanistan. or Vietnam, or Korea, or any number of places that we've invaded or continue to occupy in one way or another. There's nothing that any other country could do about that. So, military force is not always possible. You know, there's just once a country is powerful enough. Oh, look, Dan Platt is trying to join. Let's see if we can bring him on. Well, he's getting that situated. Looks like he's trying to add that. Anyway, let's move on in the comments here. Natalie says, agree, Zach, and it's never the deciders of war who end up going to fight that war. Absolutely, that's what I'm getting at. The people that send others to war, it's pretty easy for them to do so. Hey there, Dan, how you doing? No, I'm not hearing your audio yet. I can hear you. It's a bit garbled. Wow, it sounds like you're underwater.
How about now?
Oh, that's a lot better.
Mic was set to default for some reason.
Oh, that happened to me too earlier, and I just switched it back.
So I'm no worse for wear. I just hit a wall with the flooring project I had, where
Oh,
I just discovered I'm a nail for my depth, and I hate that. You know,
oh,
I hate that I can't renovate shit. It's something I wish I learned over time, but it's just haven't had those opportunities
that's too
thrown in
bad.
my way. I remember going to Habitat for Humanity and volunteering there with some idea of like, oh, maybe I'll pick up some things and learn how to renovate and build.
Sure.
But I ended up just kind of painting doors because that was the work that needed to be done, and I know how to paint stuff.
Okay,
I'm good painting.
that's good.
Not so great with carpentry.
Carpentry can be difficult.
Like
That's for sure.
that Freakazoid episode. And
I don't know that. I haven't really seen much Freakazoid, so I don't know which one you're referring
there's
to.
a Freakazoid episode where the one of the villain wants to make like a super weapon, but it has to be made of wood. So he needs carpentry skills.
Oh no.
So he kidnaps Norm Abram. He's
That
the
sounds like that
host.
was a really good show.
He was the host of This Old House, by the way,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the Onions. A show dedicated to renovating old buildings. Probably started back in the 80s when you could buy a home and renovate it, or this is when boomers were buying their first house, and
Right.
they would be renovation jobs, like my father.
Yeah.
And but the thing about that is, these old houses, you just don't know how they were put together, really. There's nothing standard
That is
about
true.
it. And so what I discovered, I was replacing a floor of a bathroom, and I finally got the last of the plywood up and discover that, now as I'm trying to get the last piece out, I'm noticing the joist is moving with it.
Oh no, that's not what you want.
The joists are floaters. They're just floating on brick. They're just not attached to anything.
Oh.
So I'm like, well, how? So I'm basically just like, I have no confidence I could just put the strand board that I got down and start screwing, because I'm like, this isn't stable, and I don't know how to get it stable, because there's all this brick and none of it's level, none of it's like attached, and it's like, great, now I need masonry screws or this or that, and like there's just it seems all the floors are just on brick.
I see.
So there's no cross beams, no nothing, none of the stuff that any YouTube video would show.
Oh no.
So I'm ready. Unlike, maybe, I don't know if my father would power through, may rest in peace, but I'm just gonna say, like, Mom, let's just get a contractor.
Yeah.
Someone who's either worked with old houses or just just knows like, okay, I know how to attach this,
Yeah.
or what to do, like how to keep it steady or something, or just do it, But
Right.
it's like I need training wheels on. I need something that's so simple to just like screw board down and like good. I know how to do that, and I'm confident. Now you add on the extra challenge of it being joists that are not 2x4. So I don't want to take up your time. So you're covering Howard Zinn.
Yep. Yeah, I've been doing that pretty much every Monday, just going through people's history.
I haven't actually read it, though. My introduction, and I think for the true beginner, Lies, my teacher told me, is a pretty good starter.
Oh, I've heard that come up a few times. I'll have
Yeah,
to check that out.
I read that. I forget how old I was. I guess I was in college. It was just light reading, and pretty much enjoyed it. It was like stuff I already knew.
Yeah.
These weren't lies I was told. So,
Well, that's good.
but I'm sure in many states and school districts, the curriculum hasn't really changed or wasn't updated in the 90s. It was only in the 90s you would have certain school districts maybe incorporate some of Zinn's perspective on let's
Hmm.
talk about let's include labor history, let's include other perspectives. I think this is dependent on whether or not the school district's diverse. If there's black population, they're going to include more black history, and that means
Hmm.
talking about the things in Zinn's work.
I see. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely got a pretty sanitized version of history coming up through school. Um, one of the passages we just went through talked about how it was really the French that were uh, that landed the decisive blow in the Revolutionary War, not Washington crossing the Delaware and all of that sort
That
of
was
thing.
just
But I got
keeping
the Washington
that was all keeping
version.
them busy. It was
Right.
just, can you keep the army together and can you keep the rebellion going long enough for the actual cavalry to arrive
Right.
in the form of a fleet that can actually take on the British fleet and a bunch of troops too, which doubled the numbers at Yorktown.
Hmm.
So it was just about kind of, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of smaller victories as well as, but it was all
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of keeping the British Army isolated or contained somewhat, even though in the first 2 years of the war they really weren't contained until Saratoga. That was the kind of
Hmm.
like, okay, now the British armies cannot just move around like willy nilly, but as far as New York and New Jersey were concerned. But then again, it was also the cautiousness of the Clintons, the generals. Like they kept the
Hmm.
army in New York, and they could have sallied forth and just started raising, all the towns and whatever, any
Sure.
rebel towns, but they just decided to hunker down. And I think this is because they themselves were Whigs. There were British generals that were sympathetic, so they dragged their feet. So it wasn't so
Ah.
much these victories and stuff, but just you didn't have high morale. There wasn't this real um, motivation to go and crush the rebels
Hmm.
because the factionalism was on the British side as well as the American
Hmm.
side. It just so
That's very
happened you had a
interesting.
Tory government that was like a conservative.
Cool. That's good context.
Yeah. Some of it I got in middle school in
Yeah,
my
I
school
definitely did
district.
not get that.
Not all of that, not all of what I just laid out, but at least like when we're talking about the run up to the war and American history, that it
Yeah.
was a lot of colonial pressure to against British policy that hemmed us in and were negatives like don't cross the Appalachians,
Right.
don't keep pushing on indigenous peoples. It takes a lot of money to protect you guys
Right.
as you go out and slaughter Iroquois.
Well, I mean,
It's
it
and
sounded
we
like
yeah.
it sounded like they were also afraid of white settlers joining the various native groups because that tended to happen, and when it did, they didn't come back to the European settlements.
There was some of that as well, but just like the whole, well, if you're not going to pay for it, then we'll pay for it ourselves because we're already armed. We don't need British Army regular protection or something.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to do the readings, I guess, but but it really comes down to, look at all this land we could be speculating on, and the British won't let us. There's the aristocrat side of it. The other side of it was the monopolism of the British East India Company. So you did have pressure on the working class as well. But this is what Zen goes into. So I'll shut up now. I'm just
no problem. No, this is good stuff too.
Of concessions to some, brutality to others. In a letter to Thomas Jefferson, he described a raid by his troops on Loyalists. Quote, "They made a dreadful carnage of them. Upwards of 100 were killed, and most of the rest cut to pieces. It has had a very happy effect on those disaffected persons, of which there were too many in this country." Greene told one of his generals, quote, "to strike terror into our enemies and give spirit to our friends." On the other hand, he advised the governor of Georgia, quote, "to open a door for the disaffected of your state to come in." In general, throughout the states, concessions were kept to a minimum. The new constitutions that were drawn up in all states from 1776 to 1780 were not much different from the old ones. Although property qualifications for voting and holding office were lowered in some instances, in Massachusetts they were increased. Only Pennsylvania abolished them totally. The new Bills of Rights had modifying provisions. North Carolina, providing for religious freedom, added that, quote, "nothing herein contained shall be construed to exempt preachers of treasonable or seditious discourses from legal trial and punishment." Maryland, New York, Georgia, and Massachusetts took similar cautions. The American Revolution is sometimes said to have brought about the separation of church and state. The northern states made such declarations, but after 1776 they adopted taxes that forced everyone to support Christian teachings. William G. McLaughlin, quoting Supreme Court Justice David Brewer in 1892, said that, quote, "this is a Christian nation," unquote. Says of the separation of church and state in the Revolution that it, quote, "was neither conceived of nor carried out. Far from being left to itself, religion was embedded into every aspect and institution of American life," unquote. One would look, in examining the Revolution's effect on class relations, at what happened to land confiscated from fleeing Loyalists. It was distributed in such a way as to give a double opportunity to the revolutionary leaders to enrich themselves and their friends, and to parcel out some land to small farmers to create a broad base of support for the new government. Indeed, this became characteristic of the new nation. Finding itself possessed of enormous wealth, it could create the richest ruling class in history, and still have enough for the middle classes to act as a buffer between the rich and the dispossessed.
So he uses the word dispossessed to refer to anyone working class.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a thought about just separation of church. Note there that when I was a new atheist, there was so much clamor about whether or not this was a Christian nation and were the founders supportive or not, or is it written into our founding documents. And of course, my take, along with others more radical minded, were like, who gives a fuck? We don't care. Even if we were a Christian nation as ruled by the Supreme Court justice there in the first of the Supreme Court, I'm like, well, we want them not being one now.
Right.
We're not traditionalists. We don't, that's what this movement was about. Even though you would have more liberal atheists or new atheists that were all about stressing that no, we are the true inheritors of the founding legacy of America, about separation of church and state. But as that passage said, like, no, that's not really how it was, or it was just more. It's not one or the other. And although there were always questions of quote unquote freedom of religion or freedom from religion, never freedom from religion, I guess, but
Yeah.
the ability to worship because you had multiple groups. And
Mhm.
post Reformation, there was some historical memory, just like a century old, of like, we don't want to do what was happening in Europe. They were just a generation or so removed from literal massacres. Like, oh, there's some Protestants in that town next door, let's massacre them. They didn't. There was an effort made to not bring that over to the colonies. They just couldn't
Right.
afford to, really.
Right.
It's practical. It's a material condition. It's practical that we cannot afford to fight over what kind of Christian are you. And then just like whiteness is about uniting different kinds of Europeans against
Mm-hmm.
the enslaved or indigenous.
Whoever
We
the
need to
current target
unite
is,
as
yeah.
Christians against these non-Christians.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I agree with your point of view. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter what a bunch of slave-owning, white, rich landowners thought about much of anything. That is not the country we have today, and that's not the country I want today. So, ultimately, it doesn't really matter. And that's why constitutional originalism, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, do you go along with all of that stuff? Do you really want to bring back slavery and everything else that we had in the original Constitution? I mean, I guess some of them do. I have actually encountered some people that are like, oh, yeah, I'm fine with all that. But by and large, it just seems like something to say to shut other people up that doesn't really have a lot of thought behind it.
No further comment. I was just checking
Yeah.
out something I ordered, and of course it's saying,
Of course.
no, it's on me though. I ordered the wrong item. Not that
I
they
see.
sent me the wrong item.
They
but
didn't send you the wrong thing.
The issue
Well,
is I'm trying to connect my stupid Android phone to my computer,
mhm.
which I haven't been able to in, like 2 years.
Oh,
And I guess because my original cord that could connect it was crapped out, and I got a replacement cord, but it was only a charging cord, and I suppose it's not designed to transfer data because
it didn't have the USB end.
I plug it in, and then I got again another replacement. Charging cord stopped working. I mean, it works, but it doesn't charge quickly.
Sure.
Doesn't do the rapid charge. Now I have a
Yeah.
cord that does, but it's not a USB type. It just goes charge box. So adapter.
I see.
So it's just I'm trying to get a particular cord to do data transfers with, so I can put music on my phone and not rely on streaming services. So,
Yeah.
I did talk about the one that's a co-op, but I have to put money in, and I haven't figured out how to put more money in. It's weird.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
their site isn't clear about where you put in the money, or where's the page with where you pay. It's weird. I'll have to email them, I guess, because it's not on the app. And I go to the website, and then I go to my profile account pages, and it's information that isn't payment. It's odd, but maybe I'm missing something.
That is odd. I hope so, because it sounded like a cool service, or at least a cool concept.
It is. I just got to put in $5 every now and then.
Sure.
Until built up a library of
too
sorts.
bad.
But I built up a library over 12 years. Actually longer than that. Now it's like 15 years. And I like to it again. Besides, when I'm on my desktop, and no goddamn. Well, my backup is I spent the money on late generation iPod Shuffle. So hopefully that will connect, and I can do use things with that.
That's good.
The seller said they had to replace the battery. So
Oh,
that means the battery won't die immediately, which is what happens
I
every
sure
time I
hope
get
so.
an iPod Shuffle, which is just to me the most superior thing to listen to music on.
Have you ever tried a Zune before? I've heard those are actually the best in terms of user
Uh,
interface and
okay, I don't want to use a
usability.
screen though. Um,
Oh, okay.
and the Shuffle is like you have your library on your computer, and you
Uh-huh.
Shuffle, and it randomizes your library and puts 2 gigs worth on. So, but it's always a different 2 gigs. So,
Sure.
and the 2 gigs is
Yeah.
enough. It's a day's worth. So,
Yeah. That's a good amount.
I go through that 2 gigs. It takes me a few days, and then I refill it, and it's always different music. And I definitely have enough. I have 20 days worth of music as far as length,
Yeah, man.
all kinds of
I probably have.
genres, and it's like because like streaming wants me to basically throw like all of it has to be in the garbage. It's worthless. You can't take it with you. You can't listen to it anywhere. Um,
Yeah.
Phones aren't designed to carry a few gigs worth of
All that
music.
much. Right. Yeah, I don't have any music on my phone right now. I do have a bunch, I think in the OneDrive cloud. I think I've just carried that around from computer to computer. All my old hard copies of stuff that I put up
James
onto my
says
computer.
Microsoft got rid of Zune. Does that mean they just start
Well,
making
yeah.
new versions?
Yeah, they
Because
just
that's
stopped
definitely
making
the
it.
case with the iPod Shuffles. They're always old, used, refurbished, what have you. That's why I bought like half dozen of them, but the battery usually just lasts for a month or two, and then it only charges an hour or something, which isn't long
Hmm.
enough to matter.
Yeah, they were
And
not meant to be
they're not
anything
meant
but
to be
disposable.
30 years old, because or
Right.
20 years old anyway.
Yeah.
The iPod Shuffle second gen, which has a clip on it, that's why I love it. It has a clip. So and of
Ah.
course I try to find an alternative MP3 player with a clip, but they're all like bullshit. Doesn't work with anything like stuff like this, which is literally like a bootleg thing. And it's got a
That's funny.
clip like I want, and it's got the jack, and it can connect to my computer. But when I
Mm-hmm.
do, nothing happens. Like
Oh,
there's
that's
no,
weird.
I don't know what software to use with it. I don't know how to get stuff on
Oh.
it. Do I just there's a folder? Do I put the music in?
Huh.
That didn't work. So
That's
and
too bad.
yeah, it's it's so frustrating. I'm in circles for a year. I didn't have to care until I started working at a job where I could listen to music for
Yeah.
hours at a time. So
Is there
by
no?
music, I mean podcasts and things, which are
Yeah.
obviously easy to stream or what have you, but I don't want to use all the goddamn data to use YouTube.
Oh.
And there is Spotify, but I'd rather not use Spotify.
Yeah. No, I hear that. There's a lesser known player. It's called Player FM, and it's completely commercial free. I think the paid version you can make playlists and stuff, but you can just
Hold on.
sure. All right. Well, we will go back into the book while we're waiting for that. Hello, Lin Wu. Sigh. What are you sighing about today? I mean, I know what I'm sighing about today. It was a blazing hot day. Had to had to. It was nice to plant flowers. I was doing some flower planters for some. One was for a rooftop uh, on an apartment complex, and the other was ground level. But oh, stuff not being made anymore that actually solves the problem. Yeah, isn't that the truth? Unless you subscribe to like 54 different services that each do one thing. Um, Spotify, yeah. The player, the podcast player that I like the best is called Player FM. Let me link that one up there. Oops, that's not the right URL. There we go. Player FM. So it's commercial free. I don't even know how they support themselves. But they got pretty much anything. It's one of those podcatchers that just goes off of like Apple's feed. So like if you have your podcast on Apple, it usually automatically puts it onto Player FM. But kind of the cool thing about Player FM too is you can actually add podcast feeds. Like if they don't have that in their current library, as long as you can find the what do you call it? It's like the source feed for a given podcast. You can put it into Player FM, and then it will automatically load up all the episodes of your favorite player. DJ Robin. Well, you know what? I actually do have a podcast as well. I have this show in podcast form up to about the middle of last year. Actually, maybe it was kind of late. It was more like November or something like that. But anyway, I have a bunch of episodes up on all the different podcast platforms except for, I think I'm not on Stitcher yet. And that was the reason that I had gone over to Podbean. I was on Anchor FM. Yeah, you can find the show in podcast form, and pretty soon I plan on starting to put out episodes again. Just go through my back catalog and little by little put out episodes. So for that one, there's another cool app, and it's called Pod News. So since there's so many different podcasting platforms, if you just go to podnews.net and type in whatever podcast you're looking for, it has basically every podcast cataloged. And all you have to do is search for your particular one that you want to find, and it will list all the different players that it is on. So like we can do mine right now. Go to Bread Theory. And as soon as I can bring it up here. So here's the link to my Pod News page for Bread Theory. And then all you got to do is scroll down, and it shows there's a link to listen to it on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, Curiocaster, Apple iTunes, Overcast, Player FM, Pocket Casts, Pocket Index, Podchaser, Podfiend. You get the idea. So there's a whole bunch of ones. Spotify as well. Oh, the RSS feed. That's the one I was looking for. If you can find the RSS feed for any podcast, you can put it into Player FM, and it will automatically catch all the episodes for it. I see you're back there, Dan.
Yeah.
Cool.
Just a quick chat with my brother.
All right. Let's move on a little bit. I don't have a whole lot more. I got about 15 minutes left before I gotta get off, but we can get through a little bit more of the chat.
I will not interrupt.
The huge land holdings of the Loyalists had been one of the great incentives to revolution. Lord Fairfax in Virginia had more than 5 million acres, encompassing 21 counties. Lord Baltimore's income from his Maryland holdings exceeded £30,000 a year. After the Revolution, Lord Fairfax was protected. He was a friend of George Washington, but other Loyalist holders of great estates, especially those who were absentees, had their land confiscated. In New York, the number of freeholding small farmers increased after the Revolution, and there were fewer tenant farmers who had created so much trouble in the pre-Revolution years. Although the numbers of independent farmers grew, according to Roland Berthoff and John Murin, quote, the class structure did not change radically, unquote. The ruling group went through personnel changes as, quote, the rising merchant classes of Boston, New York, or Philadelphia slipped quite credibly into the social status, and sometimes the very houses of those who failed in business or suffered confiscation and exile for loyalty to the crown, unquote. Edmund Morgan sums up the class nature of the revolution this way, quote, "The fact that the lower ranks were involved in the contest should not obscure the fact that the contest itself was generally a struggle for office and power between members of an upper class, the new against the established." Looking at the situation after the revolution, Richard Morris comments, "Everywhere one finds inequality." He finds the people of "we the people of the United States," a phrase coined by the very rich Gouverneur Morris, did not mean Indians or blacks or women or white servants. In fact, there were more indentured servants than ever, and the revolution did nothing to end and little to ameliorate white bondage. Carl Degler says, out of our past, "No new social class came to power through the door of the American Revolution. The men who engineered the revolt were largely members of the colonial ruling class. George Washington was the richest man in America. John Hancock was a prosperous Boston merchant. Benjamin Franklin was a wealthy printer, and so on. On the other hand, town mechanics, laborers, and seamen, as well as small farmers, were swept into the people by the rhetoric of the revolution, by the camaraderie of military service, by the distribution of some land. Thus was created a substantial body of support, a national consensus, something that, even with the exclusion of ignored and oppressed people, could be called America." Stoughton Lynn's close study of Dutchess County, New York in the Revolutionary period corroborates this. There were tenant risings in 1766 against the huge feudal estates in New York. The Rensselaerwyck holding was 1 million acres. Tenants, claiming some of this land for themselves, unable to get satisfaction in the courts, turned to violence. In Poughkeepsie, 1,700 armed tenants had closed the courts and broken open the jails, but the uprising was crushed. During the Revolution, there was a struggle in Dutchess County over the disposition of confiscated Loyalist lands, but it was mainly between different elite groups. One of these, the Poughkeepsie Federalists, opponents of the Constitution, included men on the make, newcomers in land and business. They made promises to the tenants to gain their support, exploiting their grievances to build their own political careers and maintain their own fortunes. During the Revolution, to mobilize soldiers, the tenants were promised land. A prominent landowner of Dutchess County wrote in 1777 that a promise to make tenants freeholders, quote, "would instantly bring you at least 6,000 able farmers onto the field," unquote. But the farmers who enlisted in the Revolution and expected to get something out of it found that, as privates in the Army, they received $6.66 a month, while a colonel received $75 a month. They watched local government contractors like Melancton Smith and Matthew Patterson become rich, while the pay they received in continental currency became worthless with inflation. All this led tenants to become a threatening force in the midst of the war. Many stopped paying rent. The legislature, worried, passed a bill to confiscate Loyalist land and add 400 new freeholders to the 1,800 already in the country. This meant a strong new voting bloc for the faction of the rich that would become anti-federalists in 1788. Once the new landholders were brought into the privileged circle of the Revolution and seemed politically under control, their leaders, Melancton Smith and others, at first opposed to the adoption of the Constitution, switched to support. And with New York ratifying, adoption was ensured. The new freeholders found that they had stopped being tenants, but were now mortgagees, paying back loans from banks instead of rent to landlords.
So a little step upward for some. I mean, tenant farmers, basically one step removed from slaves, never made it out with anything. You know, always ended up more and more in debt. So I got to imagine, at least having a mortgage, they have a little better chance. Just a little better. But.
Truly, what makes socialist revolutions, the existing ones, so evil and brutal is the fact that they don't compensate the previous ruling class at all. Even the French Revolution, with the you had radical Jacobins in charge, and they made, I guess, the same. They did the same thing that, quote, Stalinism. The totality of like, we're going to rule by fear. But the difference was, though, they didn't have the money or the resources to do big projects like, the economic development of 5-year plans and whatever, but that literally a century apart, more than a century. But like the French Revolution compensated, like when Napoleon took power, he compensated landowners so that they would stop agitating for counter-revolution, basically, against him. Um, and the American Revolution, it's called that, but it's as this lays out, it's a revolution of one ruling class that were still subservient to the aristocrats in an ocean away. So it was like they hit a glass ceiling, and obviously they had egos that why should I have to hit a glass ceiling?
Right.
That's the petty reason for fighting a whole war and all that. Obviously, it's not just that, not just doing psychoanalysis. I read a book on psychoanalysis of America post 9/11, and I enjoyed some parts of it, but I was sort of bored by a lot of it, since it's just kind of it's literal psychoanalysis of big issues. It's just like putting it down to like, Daddy didn't love me, and that's what it all comes down to. Which is to me kind of feels like a liberal way of dealing with problems. It's like, it's just people aren't treating each other like there's just a misunderstanding. It's not like this whole like there isn't really a victim or an oppressed class or anything. It's just I think there's just two sides, and there needs to be a compromise. That's what it feels like.
The better, nicer people need to be the ones in charge.
Oh yeah, we need to
the meanies.
Yeah, we need to change our thinking or something, and that's enough.
Right.
Like we just need one good speech, or obviously it's more than that. But he was going into evil and how evil develops, and he spent like a lot of time on that. But what I did like was he was doing a breakdown of Zizek, sort of to critique him, but at the same time just sort of explain how Zizek is like how you change the status quo. And it kind of comes down to not interrogating, but exposing the unwritten rules of society, because that's that's where the real contradictions are. Once you start talking about all the unwritten rules that underlie things, it's like you just get it's lies all the way down, and there's just there's no justification for any of it.
Yeah.
So
lies and mythology too.
And ideology melts away. It melts away. I was having a conversation about like this with my friend, who he had an issue in that. So he rents a storage garage, but it's on in the densest neighborhood of the city. So parking's at a premium. Lots of places to get a ticket, and both him and his employee got a ticket in front of the driveway, but when he was offering to pay the ticket, since he parked doing his business, he said, "Oh no, it's okay. The city waived it." Like I said, I did so with the permission of the owner, and they waived it. And this made him really puzzled, because they wouldn't waive his ticket, and he is the owner. So he's like, what is going on? What is this injustice? Is this because I'm not a white man and the employee was? And he made posts about it, because he is not only, he's on the school board, but he's also a guy who he will speak up about it. He's Egyptian. He's not white bread. But it turns out, he gets called out on it by the city treasurer. This happens with many other public officials that like make complaints, but there's no systemic critique or what have you. But he's like, we're always shooting each other in the foot. Council people will complain about this or that, how unfair it is. But I have the records, and the records say that nothing went wrong, or he had to take the time, the city treasurer, looked up that no tickets for that block have been waived in years. And so my friend is like,
Hmm.
so he lied to me, and he goes to him to charge like, and in the process, he asks like, did you get the letter saying it was waived? And it's like, yeah, I have it. I'll go get it, or something. But he didn't. He didn't really have
Uh,
it. He was just covering his ass, and because of so he makes another public Facebook post apologizing, saying he was wrong about a former post. Doesn't give the guy by name, but is really upset at him
yeah.
for lying to him because and we were discussing like why would he lie about this, because when he asked, like, he just didn't have an answer, he didn't give one, and he
Mhm.
was also the employee was a little aggrieved, and that like, well, there wouldn't have been a problem if you didn't talk about it, if you didn't share that I had it waived and you didn't, just leave well enough alone. And then we're talking about his privilege, his more whiteness than mine,
Uh-huh.
certainly, because this guy, in fact, is a libertarian. And
Ah.
because what happened was, when confronted, he said his mother paid for the ticket, and he wanted. So he told a white lie about it having waived, because as far as when you're thinking in terms of white lies, the
Uh-huh.
outcome's the same. Oh, it's taken care of. You don't have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
worry about it.
Right,
You
right.
don't have to feel bad or pay for this. Because I didn't have to pay for it. But in his mind, it's the same thing. Whether his mother
Uh-huh.
pays for it or it's waived by the city, it's
Or it's
taken
waived by
care
the
of.
city. That's
But
funny.
to a guy like me or my friend, it doesn't matter. It really
Yeah.
doesn't. Especially, and it created confusion on his part. White lies do have a cost. Um, I never got used to doing it. I only told white lies to cover my ass with my parents when I wasn't doing certain homework. But then once I'm in the real world and I'm dealing with other people that I know that white lies will just lay a foundation of mistrust later,
Yeah.
or things I have to keep track of about what I lied about, or or what have you. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's just more work to me to
No, no, it
not
definitely
be
is.
honest, but
Have to
it's
keep all those
sort of like there's some
stories.
saving face culture that I
Yeah.
never had was instilled with.
Uh-huh.
I think it's well, it's not a Jewish thing. But yeah, that's but it goes to the ideology at play, is what I'm coming around to. That in his mind, he was doing the right thing, and he didn't have to, like, there was an unspoken rule that you just don't talk about how your ticket was taken care of, because it doesn't matter, because
Mhm.
it's just going to be taken care of.
Right.
And so we were discussing how, like, he's the kind of guy who's never really had to deal with any real obstacles, or no one said no to him in any serious way. He's always had my parents to bail him out or something. And at the same time, he's also a guy who's annoyingly a workaholic, or like he has a full-time job, but he's still bugging
Mm.
my friend for more work. He's just like, he wants more work. And both me and my friend, who's really an artist at heart, he just wants to do art. And he doesn't, it's like, and he turns to me and goes like, Dan, I thought, isn't it just natural that people want to work less? Why, and that's why he's confused by his employee who wants to do more. He already has a full-time job. He's not hurting for money.
Mhm.
And that's the thing where it's just, and I'm reminded of the latest Channel 5 video at
Oh,
a
yeah.
bike fest
I
in
saw that.
Florida. The bike fest in
Yes.
Florida. So with the woman
Yeah.
in who works for the DOD with the coleslaw. You know where I'm going with
Yes.
this?
I remember her.
Someone commented below, like, she works for the Pentagon and she still needs to do 2 other jobs to
Uh-huh.
make ends meet. But I see it differently, because I've literally heard from people like that, where no. If I'm going to do something that's fun for me, I might as well get paid for it, because that's the culture of workism or workaholic life,
Yeah,
where
no, I see
it's
that.
just the water you're in. It's just natural to work as much as possible. You need to, I guess, spend it, because when you're attending, you're buying drinks for yourself as much as you're serving them. So it's like, or you get the drink for free and that's your pay. So it's like, well, I bartend and I do coleslaw wrestling because that's fun, and I might as well get paid for it.
Yeah.
Outside of the soul sucking job of DoD investigations, which she said she does. That's what I thought of.
No, I think it's a good chance that's true. Because yeah, you look at, I think that's a good analysis, because she has the one working stiff job with the DoD, but then her other two jobs are just basically having fun and also getting paid for it. I think there's something to that.
It's like the dream of doing what you love and getting paid for it. Like, oh, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. It's like trying to split the time in the same way that I would want to split my time, where I work part-time, and then the other half of the time I would work, I would be doing organizing or activism, which is what I've done the last 6 years of my life. My gimme honeymoon period of bachelorhood or whatever. Now I have to settle down because I'm in my 30s. That's what it feels like. Even though I still have these ideas of just working the state job for a certain amount of time and then retiring to something, to the life.
Yeah, I feel that too.
But that's a dream that people like rural people or Americans can dream of like having fun and getting paid, because you still need. It's just because in their mind or in the ideology of the pure ideology of like, of course you have to get paid. You have to make as much money as possible. That's unquestioned. Why do I have to work why do I have to earn so much? Not so much work so hard, but earn so much. That's not in their head. Their head is just, I have to work X amount to pay the bills, and I want extra for luxuries if I'm going to have them. I'm also reminded of someone I worked with at the grocery store, where this is a woman who, and she wasn't the only one, but she was the one who really got my goat, so to speak, or confused me. Was she's kind of in her 50s or something. She's a state employee, a grade 14. That means she's paid 40 grand or more, more than the median income, maybe as much as 60. And she's still working weekends at the grocery store. And not only that, she spends another hour there clipping coupons once she's done with her shift. And then she clips the coupons, and then she does another hour to do her shopping. And I asked her, why are you working this part-time gig? Just like 8 hours or whatever. Like, this is 8 hours I could have, by the way. And I don't have any other job. You're working for the state, man. You got it made. Salary, health care, benefits.
Everything taken care of.
Why are you here at a minimum wage job? And like, well, this is the money. I get money for my groceries. You don't get money for your groceries with your salary. It's never enough. But I didn't press her, but I could theorize that, like, she just doesn't want to be home and her family on the weekends.
It's a good excuse then. Huh?
Or something like she spends so much on her family, spoiling them or whatever, that she doesn't have money for herself. But she's truly enjoyed doing the bare minimum out during her shift, and clipping coupons for an hour, and then doing the shopping for an hour.
Wow.
And that's her Sunday. And I don't know if she worked Saturday or if she was just there Sunday, so it was just the one shift. So I guess, but that would only mean like she earned like $80. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it was I could not understand her, because she either couldn't be honest about what she really was about, or didn't understand herself. So that's why I didn't psychoanalyze her. But she was a big, hefty white woman who kind of
That's
Had
interesting.
a Honey Boo Boo type of vibe,
Oh,
like
okay.
one of the like one of the older
Just kind of.
adults of that family.
Yeah, yeah.
I did meet her daughter, and it was brief, but yeah, I guess the impression is she's a spoiled brat, but I didn't really,
It's
I wasn't
funny.
around her enough to conclude that or not.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Interesting
James.
people.
She clipped coupons from like the Super Saver like pamphlet that we
I
had that
hate clipping
day.
coupons. That would be,
Hmm.
you know, you couldn't
You
pay me
you
to do
can
that kind of
truly
work.
cut your grocery bill in half, but
I'm sure you can.
but it's like an
God.
hour, at least an hour of labor if if you're going through all of the things.
Uh-huh.
And it means you have
Yeah.
to get certain items and
Right.
you're kind of constrained, and I hate those constraints. That's why I
I do
would never
too.
do them, because it's just certain, because there's also types of coupons. So there's the coupons we would like the grocery store would print for our store. There's manufacturer coupons, and then ones
Uh-huh.
from the newspaper, and they're all for different things. And there were these hustlers that would come in with tons of manufacturer coupons. These are ones that like you go to, say, Suave's website. They'll
Yeah.
have a page where you print
Prints off a coupon,
manufacturer
yeah.
coupons for them, and they're not really limited to how many you can print. So this guy would print a ton of them, like dozens and dozens, and he would basically get a grocery cart amount of Suave or other shampoos and whatever, and with all the coupons, he was cutting down $100 worth of items to
Uh-huh.
20,
Okay.
10, like 15, $20. Amazing. Took 20 minutes just to cash them out. However
Uh-huh.
long it took him to collect them all. But it's part of his hustle, which is to take all this stuff, put it on a table on a corner and then sell
And then
them
resell it. Ah.
at either retail price or a slight markup,
Sure.
and make like a ton of profit because he's only paying like a quarter per item. And
That's
so
quite
if
a
he
hustle though.
sells something for $1, he's making 75 cents. And so the convenience, it's like,
Yeah.
because the bodegas don't have the same selection as the grocery store,
True
or
enough. True enough.
there is no bodega on the corner
Yeah.
that he's staking out. The corner
Yeah.
behind him is a abandoned abandoned corner store.
That's funny. Really got to know your market though. Like, what if you bought the wrong Suave conditioner and like then you're stuck with $20 worth of product you can't move. So that's
It must
interesting.
work somehow, because I mean
I mean, yeah,
this guy did it. I mean, I wasn't cashier that much, but when I could see this guy doing this once a month or something.
that's amazing. The lengths people go to hustle up a paycheck. Yeah.
And think like, is this easier than having a part-time job or something,
I
But
know, right?
I guess it's the freedom of doing it yourself, I guess. But
That's true. That's true. When I was working as a cashier at Target many years ago, there was a lady who actually got busted, and she found that there was a dollar off coupon attached to a certain vitamin, and so she would buy like 100 at a time of these vitamins, get the dollar off for each one, and then go return them, and then get full price back somehow. I guess
oh,
they didn't somehow connect it and only give her the discounted price. I guess this was before this was all connected through the computer system. So, but yeah, she got in trouble for that. And banned from Target, I guess.
that's quite it's quite a scam. There's a lot of different kind of scams like that. Like it's a little more slippery, but basically my client that I would drive around, and this is one of the things I didn't like doing, like shopping with her, because she would get a 4-pack of something like yogurt or hummus or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
or it'd be guacamole, and it would be the 4-pack of it, which is just really stupid to me in the first place, packaged guacamole. But they she would eat one, wait a bit, so the other 3 spoil, and then return it for for the price of it. Which technically, like, she's just getting a free pack of guacamole, just a serving. But she would
Just to
do
get a
this.
serving of
She would do this with like 5 other types of items, that she liked, and she would always like. It was so weird because she would sound so earnest about like, oh, this is bad. I can't eat this now. But like, it was at the same time, it was a pattern. She would keep doing it. She would get the 4-pack, eat one, and then have the other 3 spoil, because I mean it's the kind of thing that spoils within a day anyway. It's guacamole, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And she would do it with a bunch of other things. I don't know if she did it with eggs, but bunch of things where I'm like, Jen, this isn't bad. Why are you returning this? But it's basically like, oh, you got some of it, and you're going to get score credit or whatever, the full price of it, because it's a refund.
That's crazy.
So that's what, like, when she was doing it, right, and it added so much work to, and this is why, like, she drove me crazy, because she would do that kind of thing, like a dozen different ways to save money or to steal things, in a shoplifting almost kind of way, but sneaky, and it would add up to maybe $50 at the end of the month that she was like getting for stuff for free. But it would add on hours onto the time that I would have to spend with her, driving her around. That we would where we could get everything at one store, we had to go to 5 different stores, because she would basically be ripping off each store a certain way.
Can't do anyone too much or they'll catch on.
Yeah, that, or like, yeah, it was a little bit of that, but like, she always seemed too stupid to be that crafty. But she would have these patterns. Facade. It would be these patterns that I'm like, this is on purpose. Like, this can't be like. But she would have these justifications, like, oh no, we have to go here because this is where this item is good there, or like, we need to go to Trader Joe's because they have the cheaper organic lemons. But she would only use 2 of the lemons and then return the rest once they were moldy and say, oh, they went moldy. And I'm like, because you didn't use them. And it always it seems like she's just stupid or crazy or brain, fucked in the brain from all the drugs. Yeah. I'm just ranting about stoner people, as I do. I'm just, because I just had another run-in with one who really pissed me off. Pissed me off. You'll get a kick out of this story. And I also, it was in that garage space, so my friend, Egyptian friend, was also pissed off by this. So this stoner, he's dealing though. Kind of guy where you can't tell if he's kidding about everything or if he's just doing
I hate that.
And because it's so narcissistic that like you can't tell if they're messing with you, right? You just really can't, because like if they were earnest, it's like they're messing with me, but then they're really stupid, or they play stupid. So anyway, he's asking me like after like pretending that he knows me when I don't know him, and I'm like, well, I don't remember your name. We only met once. And it was in a group. You're with a group of other stoner friends, so I didn't pay attention, and he seemed surprised or whatever. I don't know, but he didn't care. But then he asked me like, "Hey, do you smoke weed?" And of course, like I've been asked this like a dozen times over my life. I'm like, no, I don't. But then I try to make it fun by saying, "Oh, I play paradox strategy games. That's what I get high off of." But he doesn't get the joke I'm making, or the dry wet, and like a true narcissist is literal about everything. And he goes like, "Oh, whatever you're doing, my stuff is 100 times better, guaranteed." And I'm like, I'm Godsmack, because I haven't dealt with someone this stupid in a long time. or and it's also I'm like in the same room with him, and it's just uncomfortable. And we're like, dude, are you really trying to like proposition me here? Like, I'm not buying from you. I said no. Get a hint.
Yeah,
And
right.
I slighted him in this way and didn't expect it to be turned around so quickly. But like, so by the way, this is during a fair. I've gotten Caribbean style barbecue. It's delicious, teriyaki style. We have cabbage and whatever. And I'm eating it, finger looking good, right? And he's making all these fucking dumbass comments about how I'm chewing too loud and it sounds like I'm sucking cock. And then when I'm touching my phone, even though I'm wiping my fingers, like, oh, don't touch your phone, man. Like he's being like a germaphobe or something, for my sake.
Wow.
And I'm like, dude, if I'm too loud, go outside. You're not
go
trapped
somewhere
in here
else.
with me. You're just pacing back and forth looking at your phone. And or I try to chew like softer, to placate. You're like, okay, I'll fine. It's his way of saying I'm chewing too loud, but that's not what he's saying. He's not asking me to chew softer. He's just saying I'm chewing loudly, right? Because I go like, well, I could chew like softer, and he's like, and then he gets defensive, like, oh, I didn't mean that. You don't have to leave whatever. I'm just saying, it sounds like you're sucking cock. And I'm like,
Sounds like
dude,
you
you
know
want
that
me to punch
sound.
you? I'm like, you want me to punch you in your face, man? And just like all these dumbass like brain damage psychos, he suddenly goes aggro and aggressive, like, you threatening me? You threatening me? Like, and by the way, I'm sitting down in an armchair. He's pacing around. So like I'm not squaring up to him or anything, but then he starts like I'm squaring up. Right, or I'm about to, but I haven't even stood up. Right, I got food on my lap, But I'm just like I'm trying to playfully say like, dude, you're annoying me. Go away. But he doesn't like. He's like, I don't know what the fuck's with his head. So, and he's like, oh, I'll turn over this chair, man. You don't talk to me like that. You don't talk to me like
Turn over
that.
this chair.
You don't talk to me like, don't threaten me, man. Don't
Slow
threaten me,
down,
man.
buddy.
How dare he's all, how dare you? I'm like, dude, you're telling me like I sound like I'm sucking cock because I'm just eating barbecue. Because there's sauce on it.
I hate that.
And I'm like, you understand that's insulting? Like, not like, because you're definitely talking like you're homophobic. You definitely sounded put that way. Because otherwise, why would you go there?
Well, why would that even come up? Yeah.
I guess I could keep trying to be playful, like, oh, I could suck yours if, it sounds good. I knew that wouldn't work with him. This was my first,
that
first chip went right over his head.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, you need to fucking shut up. Just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate that. The people that get their feelings hurt so easily, and that means that no matter what you do, they're going to make sure that that interaction ends
poorly.
With you pissed off or annoyed or something. Just negatively in some way. So you just cannot let anything go. Like
my hypothesis is there are a lot of people, and I'm talking about like white stoners or new agers. They did drugs too early, like they did them before age 18. Whether it be pot or anything harder, they did it before age 18, and it just fucked up their brain. And there's no particular therapy or medical treatment involved with that, because it either hasn't been studied, or these people are they're narcissistic. They don't go to doctors. They don't go for the therapist. It's been worked out.
Right.
Practice, because they're in their own world. And I think I only got this guy's knowing this because this guy with a particular shirt, and they started talking about pot and whatever. They were two pieces of pot. They were both equally annoying to listen to. Yeah. So there's my answer for the month.
That's a crazy story, man. Those are the worst people. Like, just every day they're making the world a worse place for everyone around them. All right. I think I need to get going because it's
it's
But I appreciate you coming on the
I got
stream.
another hour or two. I got work tomorrow too. We gotta make lunch.
All right. There you go.
Yes.
Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for telling your stories and giving your input for the chapter and stuff. And see you.
How much more was there?
We didn't get quite halfway through this chapter. I'm not going at any particular pace. We got about a third of the way through. So, hour and 27. We got 31 minutes into it. So,
Gotcha.
yeah, we got a long ways to go to get through this book. And eventually, it's going to start getting more difficult because
it's a thick one.
Know, it's a thick one, but it's going to get more difficult too because he starts dropping the N-bomb. So I'm going to have to go through ahead of time and make a new recording that edits that out because I don't think it's allowed even on Twitch, even if it's being read in a book.
They don't allow the C word.
Yeah. Yeah. So you would think, if they don't allow that, they would, I know they don't allow you to call people that. I don't know what the rules are if it's just being read aloud in a book. But I don't really want to find out, and I don't really feel like it's necessary. Like I think everyone knows what is being alluded to.
That's a nice quotable from Natalie. If someone doesn't see the problem, then there's not a solution.
Oh, very nice.
It's very deterministically like stop. There's nothing that can be done. Yeah, fun, and it applies to in so many situations.
It definitely does. All right. Well, anyway,
by the way, I'm now an official IWW member.
Congrats on that. I got to get on. I put it up on my stream every week, but I still have not gotten to the point where I put my money down. But as soon as I get more stabilized here,
so long,
my wife just
fellow workers.
Got a job again, so it's definitely in the cards in the future to join the IWW.
Just as
anyway, we're gonna be doing our podcast or our show this Sunday, right, Dan?
Yes. Since I'm not tied down with the toilet, that's not going to happen now. So,
nice.
Because we got to bring a contractor to do. If not, maybe I'll still do the toilet, but that's going to be weeks away. Cool. So yeah. I don't know what we're doing. If you could have some video saved up, otherwise I'll bring it.
Yeah.
We'll go through
I got a bunch of videos in the hopper, and we can kind of
I can also check out my bookmarked or say favorites.
Yeah.
And use some of that as well.
Very cool.
Okay, great.
All right.
Have a good one.
Thanks for joining. And you're welcome to hop on the stream Wednesday. I'm not even sure what we'll be covering, but some, short essay, some leftist short essay of some kind. So if it's of interest to you,
put in your list the tyranny of structurelessness.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't mind reviewing that because it's on my review list. Though I have a PDF version of it. So.
Okay. Yeah. Right. I'll see if I can find that on YouTube. Very good. All right. Thanks a lot. Take care. All right, that was Dan. You can go check out 3lefts.news to see what he is putting out. Always a fun time when Dan's on the stream. We're going to try and raid somebody. I think... Oh, no, we don't have anyone on Twitch right now. But if all of you in chat want to head over to Twitch, if I can get enough of you, we'll raid into another channel. Otherwise, we'll just shout someone out and call it a night. Let's see who is on Twitch right now, who we can at least shout out. Let's see. Oh, I'm not sure who I should shout out or not. Let's see. Raid you? Well, hey, you should start streaming, James. I would definitely raid you. Looks like you guys are not getting on the Twitch yet, though. That's fine. Well, I'll just find someone to shout out rather than raid. I think. Let's see. I've been enjoying this Twitch streamer, Freddy Yeti. Recently, he had Brenton Lengel, who was a member of Left Signal Boost TV, and another Twitch streamer do is basically a mock. It was like a joke debate. So the topic would be like, come up with a conspiracy and do your best to back it up. Just kind of off the top of your head. Like I think one of them got all cereal is made of eyes, and then Brenton got what was his? I don't remember, but it was fun. It was a fun sort of like funny joke parody of a debate. So go check out Freddy Yeti on the Twitch. Yeah, you should try it, James. It's free. And here we go. Here's a nice advertisement for Twitch, aka Amazon. If you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you get one free Twitch subscription a month. And you can apply that to any streamer you like. It could be me, yeah. Could be another one that you come across that you like. But you get one free one a month. So it's a way to take a few dollars out of Jeff Bezos' hands and put it into the hands of cool leftist streamers, or just gamers, whatever streamer you like. So if you already have Twitch Prime, you can just link your account, and then yeah, like I say, you get or not Twitch Prime, Amazon Prime. I think I've been saying that wrong. Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime, you get a free Twitch sub every month. That's what I meant to say. So if you don't like Bezos, you can take some money out of his pocket, like I said, and use your free subscription on maybe me or just whoever. And that does take a little bit of money out of his pocket. Doesn't cost you anything extra. You just get it as part of having Amazon Prime. So there's that as a little incentive. You can also subscribe to my channel and get custom emotes. I have Powdered Toast Man, Peter Kropotkin, like the Peter Kropotkin from the Kropotkin Intensifies meme, and then the channel logo as my custom emotes. I think I have some more that I can make at some point, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But that's a benefit of subscribing to. All right. Anyway, I think we're just going to end it there tonight. And I will see you all hopefully Wednesday night. We're going to go over some short piece of theory. If you have any suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, it'll just be a surprise when that day comes. So thank you all for being in the chat. Thanks, James, Natalie, and the other chatters for participating. It's always a good time when you guys come around. And I will see you all Wednesday.